How to keep quilting costs low. In today's economic climate, starting a new hobby may seem like an expense that your budget just can't support. Between gas and groceries, becoming a quilter just doesn't seem like a wise financial choice. But being a quilter doesn't have to be expensive. You too can become an expert at stretching your dollar and keeping quilting costs in check. Part 1: Getting started. 1. Embrace the past. Patchwork quilting in America was born from a time when, mostly, women could not simply go to the store to buy new bedding, and fabric yardage was reserved mainly for making new clothing. Thrifty sewers learned to re-use old shirts, curtains, sheets, and even flour sacks to produce warm, beautiful, and practical quilts. Often, a woman had to make do with what she had, rather than be able to run to the store for a yard of fabric. So, a couple of quilt patterns developed that produced great results which do not demand a set amount of fabric. Beggars or Friendship Quilt. This quilt is typically made of simply of squares, none of which are identical. Traditionally, the quilter asks people to donate a piece of fabric or old item of clothing. Of course, nothing says you have to strictly follow these rules. Feel free to use triangles and use 2 or 3 pieces of the same fabric if you like. Grandmother's Flower Garden. This pattern uses honeycomb shapes to make flower shapes, and uses, traditionally, a white background to create the path. The flower shapes lend themselves very easily to use a lot of small pieces in many different colors, making it easy to reuse scraps, reclaimed fabric, and the like. Crazy Quilt. Crazy Quilts allows the quilter to ignore all the typical rules about using geometric shapes in a pattern. This also allows for using irregular remnants, scraps, and cut-up old clothing. Part 2: Keep equipment and tool costs low. 1. Learn about quilting before purchasing lots of things. Ideally, this would come from some face-to-face contact with someone with quilting experience. Quilters are usually quite happy to share their knowledge. If you do not have a family member, friend, or acquaintance that can help, check for local quilters clubs, guilds, or organizations. Check your local fabric shop for information or contacts. Check the internet on sites like Craigslist, too. 2. Many websites that can help you start up quilting, as well as on WikiHow. A simple Google search can list plenty of tutorials, including YouTube videos, and forums. 3. What you have available already? This includes not only materials, but resources. Of course, you can buy all new fabric, buy a new sewing machine, and fancy quilting software to plan it all out. However, you can significantly slash your costs if you consider free options. Quilters are often quite willing to share. This often means their expertise and tools, even, if you are lucky, their fabric stash. If your aunt, grandmother, friend, or other quilter is willing to get you started on your first quilt, she may very well be happy to let you borrow her sewing set up. If you discover you enjoy sewing and quilting, you can work towards building your set up, but you don't have to invest in everything if you have access to it. Quilting can quickly become expensive, because it is not only the fabric, but the machinery, tools, and things you may not think about now, such as notions like thread, batting, and binding, and good quality sewing scissors. Borrow a machine. If you're making your first quilt but you don't already own a machine, consider borrowing one from someone you know who has one that they don't use. Borrowing a sewing machine has the added advantage of giving you a chance to figure out which features you would like your own machine when you go to buy one. It can also be useful should you decide the hobby just isn't for you, you won't have outlaid too much money. Inexpensive racks are available that allow you to do some quilting on a standard sewing machine. You might even be able to pick one up from an online auction for even less. Consider doing some of your quilting by hand, like they did in the old days. While it may go slower than with a machine, you will still get there. Plus, you may get bonus points for doing it the old school way. Quilting frames can be expensive. Consider borrowing one, or look around online for do-it-yourself quilting frames that you can construct inexpensively out of PVC. Batting options. You can buy batting, but it can end up being the most expensive part of the quilt. Luckily, you have options. A light summer quilt may not even really need batting. You can also substitute an old blanket or one or more old sheets for batting. What a great way to reuse old ugly bedding. Part 3: Find your tools and materials at the best price. 1. Use coupons. Become part of a mailing list to receive coupons that will give regular discounts on fabric. These coupons can be used to purchase the more expensive tools that you might want but would rather buy at a reduced price. With coupons, you don't have to wait for your wanted item to go on sale. Also, if you're on a mailing list, you'll usually be notified of any special store sale events just for members and of all upcoming sales. 2. Shop the sales. Big box stores and quilt shops constantly run sales on their wares to encourage more purchases. Fabric might be on clearance by 30 to 50% off, especially if you find it just after a holiday period. And look for 2-for-1 or freebie deals. The rotary cutter you covet might be free if you buy a particular ruler, for example. Shop around and be aware of what's out there, and what might be offered in the near future. Fellow quilters always seem to have their ear to the ground on this front and can help give you a heads up. Look for sales in craft departments, not only for fabric, but also for fabric and tools. Check bedding and linen departments for blankets, sheets, pillowcases, curtains, and so on, which can all be cut and used in quilting. Often, a flat sheet may be wider and less expensive than the cut by the yard fabric. Plus, wider fabric makes excellent quilt backings. Go to garage sales and estate sales. You can find some of the most wonderful fabric and quilters' notions at simple estate sales. Estate sales are like garage sales on steroids, and the prices are generally similar. You may see some amazing vintage quilts that people are just itching to get rid of. The holy grail of garage sales, of course, is one that your quilting buddy is having. Garage sales and estate sales are one place to find a starter sewing machine. Or, visit local auctions where estate goods have been added to the auction lots. Charity stores are another inexpensive source both for sewing machines and some tools. The sewing machine may not have all the bells and whistles of the latest model, but you can do a lot of sewing even on a very old machine. The basic technology really hasn't changed, and many old machines are nearly indestructible. Most every old or second-hand machine will likely need an overhaul, deep cleaning, and tinkering for it to run reliably and well. While you can learn how to do it yourself, typically it is best to find a good sewing machine technician and let him or her do it. The investment may seem a bit much at first. It is an investment that avoids frustration and even damaged items in the long run. 3. Keep a list, and keep it in your purse or wallet. When you stumble across that estate sale, you might not buy that batting you found if you don't have it on the list. Or you might buy one too small. Or buy two you don't need at all. 4. Keep a stash. Provided you have a bit of space to store it, accumulate a selection of fabrics you can use in any project you want. This is ideal for sales purchases which were such a bargain but you're not sure what to do with just yet. Don't go overboard. Quilters are infamous for their fabric stashes that they have squirreled away for years, even decades. Even if they may not be currently making a quilt, they still may be very reluctant to part with any of it. Try to limit your stash to a manageable size, such as one tote. Use what you have before buying more, and do not buy without draining your stash. 5. Make smaller projects. Make wall hangings, vests, or bags rather than giant bed quilts, especially as you begin. They're easier to manage and they require less fabric. Smaller projects can also help to use up odds and ends. Tips. Use your creativity rather than your money to make your quilts great. You may even find that you prefer the serendipity of working with found fabrics. Fabric can be found in thrift stores, fabric donations in the craft section, sheets, blankets, and tablecloths are with home linens. Clothing can also be a source of quilting fabric, especially plus-size clothing. Membership of a quilting club or guild might open up more discount possibilities if the organization has done deals with certain stores and suppliers. Be sure to ask. Warnings. Although quilters inevitably accumulate a fabric stash, it's easy to hoard more than you can use. Be sure what you save is quality, and not too much. Periodically donate, swap, or even sell what you really won't use. Be careful that fabric you use is in good shape. Even the most beautiful vintage fabric is useless if it's so fragile it will not stand up to sewing and washing. Things. The best quality sewing scissors or rotary cutter you can find. Fabric. Straight edge. Marking tool, chalk, washable crayon, washable marker, tailor's chalk. Sewing machine, highly recommended. Knowledgeable quilter, highly recommended. Internet access, highly recommended. Calculator, highly recommended. Batting or reusable blanket, optional, but recommended. Graph paper, optional, but good for planning out quilt patterns. Fabric store, highly recommended. Coupons, highly recommended. Estate sales, garage sales, thrift stores, flea markets, etc., optional.